welcome back to another episode of Activism Uncensored. It is now the 20th of May. Today we have Morgan on. Morgan, why don't you introduce yourself, where you are and why you're there?
Hi, Josh. I'm Morgan Trowland from New Zealand originally, been living in UK and London for about 11 years. And I'm presently in His Majesty's prison High Point in Suffolk because I climbed the QE2 Bridge above the M25 and suspended myself there with a banner saying "Just Stop Oil" for 2 days.
Damn. You know, I absolutely love that. You know, that's a incredible action. I was in prison myself when you did that. You've just been given a sentence, if you, that's right, haven't you? Is it, did you get 3 years?
That's right.
And Marcus got 2 years and 7 months.
That's right.
Yes. Is that under the new police crime sentencing bill you've been sentenced under?
Yes, it was Section 78 of the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act. Section 78 is public nuisance.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to have you on the show, to be honest, mate. What's it now? I want to ask you a couple of questions about yourself, really. How did you first get involved in activism in general?
Well, I was living in the UK in 2018, and I heard about the start of Extinction Rebellion in the media.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the beginning of 2019, I realised that someone who worked in my co-working office was organising things for Extinction Rebellion. Someone I was casual friends with, and yeah, I guess because I actually knew someone, I went to some events and thought this was right on. Had ambition to the scale of the terrible.
Was you aware of the climate crisis before that?
Yeah, I've been aware of it since I guess I was a teenager in the 90s. I was aware of it. I remember going up to the mountains a lot when I was a teenager and just thinking, there's not as much snow as I'd like.
Yeah.
And I was always anxious about the snow just because I wanted to have fun in the snow, going snowboarding and stuff. That was the first time I started kind of worrying about it. I just knew that inexorably there'll be less and less snow for my life, and that was the first time I started thinking about it. And then I began reading the IPCC reports, and I think I first read one in 2005. Printed one off at my office and
2005?
Had a read through.
Wow.
Yeah, 2005. I don't remember which round that was, but I remember I read that and I was like, "This is really, really bad."
Oh,
and I left it in the office. There's a big corporate engineering firm in New Zealand. I put it in the staff lunchroom, thinking, well, obviously people will want to talk about this. Pretty dire, isn't it? And no one wanted to talk about it. So I sort of dropped it. I was like, okay, this is weird.
Yeah, isn't it? Like
carry on with life.
Yeah, it's kind of strange how some people manage to do that. You know, it's like, oh yeah, this is it's basically the world's going to come to an end, and they just kind of go, oh right, okay, and carry on with life.
Yeah, because I had the option of just withdrawing into a very privileged lifestyle and just going on holidays and going in the outdoors and doing lots of fun outdoorsy stuff and hiking and camping and snowboarding and I just did that. I moved to Canada because there's lots more snow and outdoors over there and yeah, for a long time I just how long was that? 2005 to 2019. Yeah, that's a long time. It's 14 years, isn't it? Of just chilling, just doing all the great stuff I've been able to do because I've just had a very privileged life, really.
Yeah, well, I actually don't know much about your background, to be honest. I know that you're a bridge engineer, but so how many different places around the world have you lived in over the years, and just what What kind of firms do you work for?
Ever since I graduated university, I've worked in consulting engineering, like for a consultancy firm, doing designs and calculations for different structures and mostly bridges for the last 12 years. Lived in for a few months, if we count the places I lived for a few months. Australia for a few months, Canada for a few years, India for all told about over a year.
Wow.
And Britain.
What was that like in India? I'm quite interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, I only saw a tiny fraction of India, but I lived in Delhi for a while, which in many ways is pretty horrible, but in lots of ways is fascinating. It's a fascinating place to just explore as someone curious about history. Where else do I live? In near the Himalayas, near Kashmir.
Wow.
In the hills. That was really beautiful. It's just so fresh and gorgeous up there. And I was then in the Ganges for a bit, out east in Bihar for about a month or two, different times.
Wow, you've really lived in, haven't you?
By the Ganges.
Quite a well-traveled person, aren't you?
Yeah, I had a very interesting time, and it was very, very good to me. Like, I had such a good time in India because you get fed so well as a foreign engineer. You get treated really well, and life's really good. So I had a very, very interesting, good time.
Right. Okay. That sounds like you've had a pretty awesome life, to be honest.
Pardon?
Sounds like you've had a pretty awesome life.
It has been great.
Can I ask you a bit about because now the case for the bridge action's over. How much planning went into that? Because I can imagine being a bridge engineer, you must have done it in a way that was safe for yourself.
Well, I mean, anyone who's capable of using ropes for accessing would have been able to do what we did. It wasn't. Had no specific secret knowledge.
Yeah,
at all.
I know.
It's all on Google Earth. You just have a look on Google Earth, and everything's right in front of you.
Just harnesses and ropes, really, isn't it? Harnesses, ropes, and whatnot.
Yeah, they're great skills to have. Everyone involved in activism should learn to use harnesses and ropes.
Yeah, to be honest.
So you don't do anything dangerous. I learned because of building lots of bamboo towers for Extinction Rebellion. Mm-hmm. And that's the only reason I learned to use ropes and access.
I remember that's where we met, isn't it, through Extinction Rebellion?
Yeah. It was great having you along on that crew.
Is it okay to talk about that action now? Is it all over and done with? I never heard anything.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's still got an appeal at the Court of Appeal to appeal the sentencing. But
I meant the action that we did together on the.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean that one's. I think there's a claim against the police for being unnecessarily violent and disproportionately just arresting everyone in the first few minutes. Just
for everyone who's listening, I just want to clarify. On that day, we got an old bus and pretended to be a wedding party, and drove it right through the middle of an Extinction Rebellion protest, and tried to erect a tower on the roof of an open air single decker bus with the police.
I think the most salient fact was where exactly we parked the bus.
Yeah.
Where was that, Josh?
That would be right outside the Shard in the centre of London.
Yeah, it was on London Bridge, or just the entrance to London Bridge.
Yeah, just bridge. Yeah,
the main road.
Very busy main road.
I can see why it raised a few hackles amongst the police, but they they definitely overreacted compared to what the law says. They went in with batons and smashed windows and generally sort of went like it was a pub brawl. Our lawyers described the video footage as like a pub brawl, and the point was that that's not that's not the law. If there's people stop to protest in the road, you don't immediately take out batons and start smashing things and tearing them off roofs and doing dangerous things and hurting people.
They definitely overstepped the mark that day, but you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll ever get anything back from that. I don't think they'll ever see any consequences from that. Do you?
Well, yeah, there is. There's a claim against the police in progress, because of some of their actions weren't really following the law. So that's in progress, and we'll see what comes out of that.
Anyway, I want to take back to the bridge action because have you not got like a fear of heights at all? You know, being so high up. I would have been shitting myself, to be honest.
I mean, some moments the heights feel scary when just at transition points, like it was quite frightening to start shimmying up the cable, just leave the ledge and start shimmying. It was quite frightening to get off the cable, to swing off it and transition onto the ropes, to then abseil down from the ropes. And once I had a little wobble when I was shimmying up, right? Thought I was losing my balance. But I mean, I was strapped on all the time.
Yeah.
But still, those transition moments are still a bit quite scary. But
yeah, I can imagine. Like,
have to move past them. Don't dally around back there.
Yeah. You know, I have a quote that I come to realize, which probably seems quite relevant. It's bravery is not the absence of fear. Bravery is acknowledging that fear and then doing it anyway. Which I think's quite relevant for you and being so high up in that bridge.
Yeah, I think it's not letting fear be your dominant emotion. You're obviously going to have fear, but you've got to have something stronger to dominate your.
Can I ask about your
decisions and action?
Can I ask about you? We've talked a bit about the climate crisis, but can I ask about your personal motivations for wanting to take that action and make that sacrifice? What does it mean to you? This well, how do you see this crisis that we're in now? Like, how do you see it?
Well, I took part in the Just Stop Oil campaign because it's the first step that should be urgently taken to begin dealing with the climate crisis. And I think the climate crisis is the biggest symptom of the more broader general ecological crisis and ecological collapse that we're in. The climate. Destroying the climate's the biggest type of damage we're doing to the world that sustains us. I mean, there's all the other kinds of damage too, but it's pretty horrific, isn't it? I mean, personally, I also thought about different people that I'd met in different parts of India. A few different people I got to know personally. People that just had very basic lifestyles and very little material wealth. And when you know people like that, you just realize that they have so little ability to protect themselves from dangerous climate conditions and all the effects that flow on from that, like food scarcity and water scarcity and all those problems. They've got no way of just hopping on a plane and getting the hell out of here, or just buying a bigger AC unit and insulating their house more, whatever. There's a lot of people that have no where to hide, and I think I knew a few people like that. I don't necessarily think they're totally in the firing line right now, but I know there's millions, hundreds of millions of people that are in that position right now. And I just thought, how could I answer to those people I've met? And I know there are people like that. How could I answer to those people? Because where I live, you can have you have quite an influence on things. It can have a big effect. These civil disobedience campaigns in places that are centers of power, like politically and financially, it can have a big effect. Whereas if you're someone living in a irregular suburb of Delhi, doing very menial jobs and barely scraping by with several kids to feed, you got no ability to influence any of these things. So
I guess what you could say is we've got a privilege in the fact that we live in a very influential country, and we have the means to be able to, we have the means to be able to survive, shield ourselves, insulate ourselves from the climate crisis. But what's more is, I think with our country, well, maybe not for very long, but we do have like pretty good human rights, and we have pretty decent prison conditions. Like, what are the conditions like for you in prison where you are now?
Oh, they're fine. Like, it's a bit dull, but I've also got lots of time for reading, and the food at this prison's quite good. Compared to the one I just moved from, it's a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, I think Britain's got like the most humane and evolved justice system of anywhere in the world. Like, it's the most gentle and reasoned and just system. And it doesn't work for everyone like that. It still has lots of structural racism and structural inequalities in it. But when it does work to its principles, the British justice system's one of the better ones in the world. It is it's one of the things that Britain has led the world in, and that means you can do a lot of civil disobedience in Britain without fearing for your life and your family's life, and fearing that you'll ruin your life and you have some horrible misery imposed upon you.
Yeah.
Whereas lots of people do face that. In lots of countries, like people who try to protect their bit of the Amazon in Brazil can just get shot by, maybe not by the state, but they'll be shot by people paid by people who want to use the land for other things, and perhaps the state doesn't provide any justice. It just lets rule of law break down in these areas and lets horrible things happen. Whereas in Britain, we can at least be assured of our personal safety, and that's quite a miracle in historical context. So, like, probably never happened in the history of the world.
I know, right?
Consider every different struggle for justice has happened over millennia. What we've got now is like completely magical and never before seen, in human history. So I think we have to use it to its limits, absolutely, because we've also got like existential crisis, which is never before seen. So I feel there's a massive responsibility on me living in such gentle conditions, because in one hand we have such gentle conditions in Britain, but it's sort of underhandedly and by sort of deniable means we're doing a horrendous violence on much of the world. So it's a massive
privilege.
Yeah, it's a massive.
So if you was to say anything to other British people hearing your voice right now, would you recommend them to take up go into civil disobedience?
Yes.
Would you? Well, obviously you probably would, wouldn't you? But I mean, where would you recommend them that they go if they were just getting into this or just considering it?
Well, I gather that there's Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil. And Animal Rising are all doing different civil disobedience actions.
Yeah, I do say that quite a lot on the podcast. There's quite a few different groups you could go different different routes you could go down really. You could take a slow marching adjusted pile, which I think is more at the extreme end of the climate movement, and then you've got Extinction Rebellion who are doing more of like they're trying to go down the generic route of trying to get mass mobilization. And Greenpeace have been around forever, trying to force governments and corporations into action through legal routes. So there are lots of options.
Well, there's other cool things happening, like Palestine action. Trying to shut down arms suppliers that are supplying all the military tools to keep people oppressed and imprisoned in Palestine. And
it's horrendous.
And there's some pretty cool groups that work in solidarity with migrants and asylum seekers. Like, there was something amazing that happened in Glasgow last year sometime, when the immigration enforcement was there to take away a couple of men, and then some people stopped their van, and someone locked his hands under the van's to the axles, and then people just gathered in the street to stop that immigration van from moving anywhere for the whole day, and in the end they had to give up.
And they just released them?
Yeah, they didn't end up trying to. I don't know. I don't know if they were in the van already or whatever. Anyway, they didn't get taken. They didn't get deported because hundreds of people gathered in that street and stopped it happening. And I think that actions that create solidarity with migrants and asylum seekers are just incredibly important, because no matter how successful any of this climate emergency response is, there'll be hundreds of millions of climate refugees, even in a best case scenario.
Yeah.
So we have to completely change our national mindset about people needing to migrate, because it will be life and death for hundreds of millions of people in our lifetimes. And the current position in British sort of public discourse is pretty dire. It's considered a political there's a big reservoir of political support by just hating on people who need to travel to other places to save their lives. I mean, it's just got to get rid of that attitude. Otherwise, we're all doomed, because we'll end up fighting each other, and it'll be horrible.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just have immediate sympathy. I mean, most ordinary people in Britain have immediate sympathy for anyone who's had to leave their home for their own safety and fleeing violence. It just becomes completely toxic when it's put into a political sphere. And,
I've said it.
All goes wrong.
Because I work in construction. I've come across quite a few racist builders, and I said to them, well, if you was in your country and there was a war going on, or there was a famine going on, and you had kids, wouldn't you try absolutely everything to get your kids out of that country? Wouldn't you be willing to get on a dinghy boat and travel across the oceans and do all that stuff? And they say, obviously, they'd do anything for their kids, and most people would do anything for their kids. And I think we need to stop looking at migrants as the other and start realising they are just like you. They have hopes and dreams, they have children, they have loved ones, they have we start looking at them as fellow human beings and not just like the other, really.
Absolutely. I mean, all of these problems become interrelated when you realise they're all about empathising with people far away, people you don't know. And when you seriously start to look at how do we help all these people that are migrating, one of the first things you'd recognise, we maybe stop destroying their homeland with the violence we do on the climate, and perhaps then hundreds of millions of people wouldn't need to leave their homes because of war and famine and things. I'm interested in whatever campaigns can help us empathise with people far away, because I think that's one of the main reasons why I could take pretty serious action, because I actually knew some people who would be in that situation. And I've been reflecting on one historical event in Britain that gives me a lot of hope, and it came up again because I watched the Freddie Mercury movie a couple of weeks ago. But I was thinking about this as I was going back and forth to court, and that was what happened in the Live Aid concert in 1987, when effectively what happened is a big cultural event gave millions and millions of British people an outlet to express their care for, the other one, the people who are suffering somewhere else that they're never going to know.
Mm-hmm.
And when there was a big cultural channel set up to encourage this, it just, care poured out. Like, loads of people wanted to give and help and care for people they're never going to meet. So it's all there under the surface of just about everyone.
I see all the rhetoric about. I was going to say, I see all the
what can make it come out again.
I see all the rhetoric about immigrants being the other as like a divide and conquer idea, basically. You get everyone hating the other person, you kind of take their attention away from the people who are really screwing you over.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a very basic first line of the playbook of totalitarian, authoritarian government. You got to make people afraid and make people fear your government so they keep their heads down and stay in line. And you make people afraid by punishing and finding some minority group to demonize and punish and make people afraid because they see what's happening to this minority group. And it makes everyone think, well, I don't want to have that happen to me. I mean, it's happened in loads of horrible regimes. And you can see it's completely happening in Britain. The government is not doing very well. Conditions are not great in Britain and getting worse. And so they ramp up their demonizing of migrants and asylum seekers because they just want people to be afraid of something. So they paint migrants as the enemy and terrible and the downfall of our society. And they just spend lots of airtime just spreading that kind of hatred and using that to keep everyone feeling afraid and wanting to follow a basically despotic regime.
Also, now I wanted to ask you about your. Are they going to be re-looking at your sentencing? Are you're going to be appealing your sentence? Is that right?
Yeah, there's an appeal lodged, and we're just waiting to hear when it will be heard.
Mm-hmm. So, is that on the grounds that your sentence was too strict?
Yeah, my lawyers have put in the grounds. I'm not familiar with the details of it, but they're just they have.
It's unbelievably strict, that really, isn't it? 3 years for causing some minor disruption under the public. That's the longest sentence anyone's ever received for climate activism in the UK in history.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, there's some other public nuisance convictions in recent years, and I think the most extreme one so far was the case of James Brown for climbing on an airliner at City Airport, and he eventually got 4 months for that. So, yeah, they've just...
They've stepped it up massively, really, haven't they, with you?
Yeah, it reacted. And I think, in a way, in a way, this is ultimately the goal of civil disobedience, to do... The aim of any civil disobedience against a regime is to provoke the regime to overreact.
Which they definitely have done now.
By overreacting, it creates a big effect on all the sympathetic part of the country, and so in a way, the overreaction is useful for the cause, because
Well,
if they'd just done something more reasonable, it would not be such an uproar. Whereas as it is, you get hundreds of people writing to me. I know there's thousands and thousands more people who see this and think, "Oh my God, what have we become? Like, what is happening to this country? The crisis of climate breakdown is getting worse and worse, with sort of lukewarm measures taken against it, and the government's just going crazy on imprisoning people who point that out."
Well, it really is.
I hope it provokes more people to take whatever actions they can.
Can I ask you?
I think it will.
Do you know about the upcoming Solidarity March in a week from now, the 27th?
I heard there was some kind of march about our case. Yeah, not much, no.
Okay, so there's going to be a big Solidarity March against. It's going to be against the Police Crimes and Sentencing Bill. Hashtag Not My Bill. And there's quite a lot of organisations going, and you guys, it's in solidarity with you and Marcus.
Oh, great! Oh, with all the other organisations.
Yeah,
fascinating. So, yeah, that's brilliant, because I went to a few of the Kill the Bill protests back when they were putting the Police Crime and Sentencing Bill through Parliament, and I thought it was fascinating seeing how many different civil society organisations were allied against it, and I was like thinking, in a way, there's not many things that could have brought so many disparate groups together. Like, there were Gypsy Roma traveller groups speaking at this rally, and there were Black Lives Matter people speaking, and because it's horrible what they're doing, and giving the police more powers to stop and search, because they know that will be used disproportionately against black and brown people. And there were Sisters Uncut, women's rights groups at this, and
I've got a list here. Do you want me to...
and Extinction Rebellion, and so in a way it got lots of people who often disagreed about exactly how we should achieve co-liberation effectively, but it got everyone working together. And friends of mine were having a very interesting time organising these rallies together, and I went to some, and I had a really interesting time just meeting people from those other social movement groups. So that's fantastic that it's kicking on.
Do you want to hear some of the groups that are going to be there?
Please, tell me.
So we've got Extinction Rebellion. We've got... What's this one now? We've got Kill the Bill, obviously. The Peace and Justice Project. Black Lives Matter. What's that one now? Money Rebellion. Okay. And Animal Rising. Plastic Rebellion. Fuel Poverty Action. We've got Republic. We've got Just Stop Oil, obviously. We've got Disabled People Against Cuts. That's pretty cool. I've not heard of those before. I'd have to get some of them on the show. We've got Don't Pay Energy Bills. Stand Up to Racism. And Campaign Against Arms Trade. You know what? Some interesting people there, actually. I could do get some of those people on the podcast myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're marching against the public order bill and in solidarity with you guys, who are obviously the first people to really get screwed by that.
Yeah, well, I think we weren't the first. I think, weren't you and the first group to get convicted under the public order?
Yeah.
The police crime and sentencing for public nuisance?
Yeah, but I got sentenced. I mean, I think Louis got the worst sentence. He got like a 1 year suspended sentence for the Formula One.
Okay, right.
We've had
you were the first. You were the canaries.
Well, you're the guys who've had it the hardest, so you know.
Yeah. There's something really interesting going on there. Just the big picture around all that, and I started thinking about it because I was in Pentonville prison, and I found a tatty old copy of John Locke's Two Treaties of Government, and he was a political philosopher around in the English Civil War time, well, after that actually, 17th century, back when Britain's modern political settlement was being worked out, where we have a parliament that's a supreme authority and all that, and it brought everything into a really clear picture for me, because like Locke lays down some of the basic assumptions about how societies work, as assumed by everyone running Parliament and that. And one of the fundamental things is that, like, he talks about a social contract, like we all have this agreement we make with each other to be in society together.
Mm-hmm.
And the fundamental thing about that social contract is that you are in society together for everyone's mutual welfare, and that the purpose of your society is to preserve public welfare, meaning everyone's welfare. And you only have society for that purpose, and therefore you only have a government, and you only elect a parliament or appoint a parliament or whatever. You only appoint them to make laws for everyone to achieve that end, to make sure everyone is well and safe and secure. And what's happening now is, in recent decades, we have a succession of governments that are governing with laws that allow mutual destruction, like they allow environment and climate breakdown and collapse. So public welfare has been intentionally destroyed through law. So, and now it's becoming really, really obvious since Extinction Rebellion kicked off. It's become really, really obvious to millions of people that we're permitting the destruction of our only home, and our public welfare is being annihilated by conscious choices in law.
Mm-hmm.
So really, you've got a government that's governing to destroy public welfare, and so that's not a power anyone ever gave to them. It's not a power you can give to someone else. You can't give someone else the power, like the arbitrary power to destroy or save your life. It's not something you can give up to anyone. So they can't. They shouldn't ever have that power.
Mm-hmm.
But it has been seized in that way and used in that way. And so that's so fundamentally wrong that it basically requires to rule in that way. You can't rule by consent, by everyone's mutual agreement, by everyone's consent, because no one would ever consent to that. So that's why you've got to rule by fear, and you've got to basically throw the rule book out. And another really critical thing in the rule book, like foundational philosophy, is that we should be governed by laws that are known and understood, so that we can, decide what we do in life, and then know what the laws are, and just avoid doing those things. And what you've seen in the Police Crime Sentencing Act is laws that are intentionally vague.
Mm-hmm.
The public nuisance section outlaws all kinds of subjective things, like causing annoyance, causing loss of amenity, causing inconvenience.
Oh my God.
Very vague things. So basically it's laws that you don't know what they are until the police have decided how to act, or the judge has decided how he'll rule on them. So that basically means you're living in a state of complete uncertainty, and therefore fear. You have to just keep your head down and just do what you think people in the police or the courts want you to do.
They had some things quite similar to that.
They have to do that because they've lost legitimacy by throwing out governing to preserve big picture public welfare. They then have to throw out all these other tenets as well. You have to bring in arbitrary laws. I mean, not arbitrary laws, undetermined laws, so that it can govern in an arbitrary way. Police can just decide on the day whether they don't like something or not.
Yeah, well,
and that's why it's got so many groups out to campaign against it, because all of those groups you described, they all, in different ways, are campaigning for people who have been shafted by the actions of the police and the justice system. And everyone, and they can all see that it's just getting worse. The police are just being given arbitrary powers to just violently detain whoever they decide is a bad egg.
Yeah.
So, and bizarrely, by passing that law, they're uniting everyone against.
Well, it's kind of working for us, really, isn't it? I mean, because it is uniting everybody. Just want to take back to something you said a minute ago about the laws being so vague. They used to have a saying in the Soviet Union, in like the government, is you find me the man and I'll find you the law, or you find me the man and I'll find you the crime. And that kind of goes back to that same idea of the laws being so vague that they could just pick and choose which laws they've broken as and when they need them. And I think that's a direction we seem to be going.
Absolutely, because when you look at all the things that people do now that could be considered public nuisances, I mean, a public nuisance under Section 78 is doing an act and being reckless to the consequence that it might cause a risk to life, injury, disease, or annoyance or inconvenience.
Annoyance.
But you see, there's a lot of, I mean, for instance, burning a whole lot of fossil fuel, that definitely creates a risk to life.
It does, doesn't it?
And perhaps one of the worst, perhaps one of the worst public nuisances that humans have ever committed. But you don't see that public nuisance law being applied to really deadly actions like that. It's only applied to political acts of disobedience, really.
The reason I wanted to get you on this show is because I believe that, you being where you are for the reasons that you are being in prison is so historically significant, and I feel like it will go down in history. But I feel like if the media and the government got their way, all this would be forgotten. So that's why I think it's very important to document people like yourself and people like myself as well who've taken action as well, and make sure these voices get heard. But yeah, it's just, I think people will look back on conversations like this decades from now, if I'm being honest. So yeah,
I sure hope there are people with the freedom and leisure time to talk about historical politics to come. That'll be in some ways a good outcome, considering the range of possibilities right now.
Well, yeah. Oh God, we don't know how bad it's going to get, really.
Certainly, is a wide range of possibilities.
Yeah, it all depends on what we do now, though, really, doesn't it? Like how soon we start decreasing our fossil fuels, how quickly we start, preparing and building resilience into our systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Like how many people survive and how many landscapes and cultures and ecosystems survive depends on how urgently we act now. I mean, sadly, like a lot of places and ecosystems and cultures are going to get horribly affected, no matter even in the best case scenarios now. But there's always things we can save. Like every increment of action now will lead to more people surviving.
Yeah,
more of the beautiful inheritance that we have in the world, more of it surviving.
The way I look at it is, the more awareness we can bring to the problem, and the more brains are working on finding a solution.
Yeah, definitely.
Or maybe here's another way to think about it. Maybe the solution to the climate crisis is in the mind of somebody who lives in the third world who doesn't have time to think about anything else but food and shelter.
Yeah, precisely. Like I've been able to do lots of neat stuff in the last 3 or 4 years, and one thing I've reflected on is that I've just been able to create lots of stuff, and I mean I've been talked about it here. I've been able to design lots of interesting things for Extinction Rebellion and build things and just be very creative. And I've really only been able to do it because I've been a very fortunate person in life. I had quite a comfortable upbringing, and I've always had economic security and everything. So that means I can mess about with stuff and take risks and experiment with things. And I've got had some resources to mess about and buy things and make things. And that's time and money that most people in the world don't have at all, and can't spend half a day messing about with some creative idea because they've got such pressing demands on their time to survive and make sure their family survives. So it also it raises this huge potential that's out there. If you could liberate more of people's innate talents and passions, there's really, you can imagine there's an unlimited wellspring of potential out there within people. Just most people are so pressed day to day, just surviving. And let's hope that changes.
Well, I think we both know that it's going to get worse. Really, I mean, all those third world countries, their living standards are like just even in the best case scenarios, they're going to decrease, and we're going to have millions of climate refugees. And I wanted to ask you a question actually, because this is the question really that plagues us all. Is so I'll tell you. We had some builders round at my dad's house the other day, and I told them about the podcast, and they saw my ankle tag, and they're asking about it, and most people, maybe I'm going to say most people aren't aware of how serious the climate crisis really is, and they're just not aware. I mean, they think they know it's getting warmer, they know something's not right, but they're just not quite, clued onto the fact of how screwed we're going to be. How do you think we can get? Here's my question to you. So, how do you think, in your opinion, we get the masses to wake up to the scale and the size of the problem? And then the second part of that question is, and how would you get them to take action? Because I guess that's the golden question, really, isn't it, that we're all searching for?
Well, I would just look at what happened at the beginning of the pandemic. There was a big government information campaign to tell people what these deadly dangers were and what actions they could take to preserve the lives of vulnerable people around them.
Yeah.
And there was on every channel, day in, day out, information was beamed at people telling them how coronavirus was dangerous and how to avoid it and what they needed to do. That'd be good, because
God, can you imagine?
More people are in danger from the climate and ecological collapse. Far more people, and far worse. I mean, it's just the consequences that will never relent. I mean, the pandemic passes. I mean, the number of people that die is dependent on how careful and how much health care people are given. But, the climate ecological breakdown just means lots of the world is uninhabitable. Institutions of government and media need to tell people.
Yeah, can you imagine if we actually had...
How much deadly danger?
Can you imagine if we had that on, like, the same way we have with the coronavirus? In fact, that's a naughty word, actually. We probably won't... we'll probably bleep that word out in this episode because we don't want to get demonetized.
What?
The word coronavirus.
Why can't you say that?
I don't know. It's a hot topic, innit, for some people. What I was going to say now, yeah, but can you imagine if we had like an information campaign like we did with the virus, and it was on all the news channels and it was on everywhere? I mean, that's fundamentally what we need, really, isn't it? And for that, we need a government that is not owned and bought, but owned by powerful corporations. We need a government that's actually, has got the people's best interest at heart. And not the...
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't see this government ever conceding to that. I think they'll fight tooth and nail. And I think it'll only be a new system of government that will do that. I'm not even sure. I'm starting to lose faith in the idea of a system of centralised government altogether, to be honest. Have you got any thoughts about that? Any...
I have lots of thoughts. I think it's really about what system of money we have. I think there's a beautiful summarizing quote of that by the banker Rothschild from the 19th century, and he said, "Give me the power to create a nation's currency, and I care not who makes the laws." And I reread a really influential book influential on me recently. That is Charles Eisenstein's Sacred Economics, and he points out in the first third of his book about all the problems that we're always going to be driven by our present money system to tear up whatever resources we can get hold of and grab everything from the commons, whether that's the commons of the land and the sea and the air, or the commons of society, like our time and our labor. We're always going to be drawn to tear up the commons and feed it into economic activity, while we have money that is created as debt and therefore endlessly needs to be repaid plus interest. It will always, even if we save and stop destroying the climate, we'll be driven to find some new realm to extract, like we'll mine the whole seabed for lithium or whatever. We'll find some new outlet to destroy ourselves.
Oh, I know.
While we still have money that has to endlessly grow to avoid financial collapse.
That's a question, right? Because now I might be naive in thinking this, but do you think it's possible to see economic growth and also reverse climate change? For example, one quick example, right? So I heard about a kind of a type of concrete that used carbon dioxide as a main ingredient. So therefore, to produce that concrete, it was carbon negative, but obviously it's more expensive than normal concrete. You know, if we were, for example, to create the largest infrastructure project in the history of mankind, all using carbon negative concrete, and we paid people to replant all the forests and all the jungles in the world, do you think it's possible to see economic growth and reverse climate change at the same time, or do you think those two things are completely opposed to each other?
Yeah, in the short term, under the present system, you could have loads of conventional economic growth addressing climate change and ecological collapse, because there's so many new systems that need to be built and so much repair work, like you described. Yeah, there's so much activity that needs to be done. So there's no lack of activity that we could be doing economically, like for money and for pay.
I see a lot of people in Extinction Rebellion. They talk about degrowth being the answer, but I don't really see that as a valid. I don't see us being able to pull it off. Really, what do you think?
I think it will be essential because, like Charles Eisenstein identified, if we're endlessly seeking growth, and the economic growth means a greater value of financial transactions circulating every year. If we're to have endlessly increasing volumes of financial transactions happening every year, then that means we need to be doing more and more activities every year for each other. Eventually we can't endlessly increase that unless people go in and inhabit other planets and things. So inevitably there will have to be degrowth, either through horrible collapse or a conscious process of fundamentally changing money so that it bears negative interest and things like that. We will not have. Yeah, there definitely can't be infinite growth, because when you talk about 3% economic growth, that effectively means all the activity in your society doubles in every generation. So you can't. It sounds modest, 3% growth, but it's doubling of your society in a generation. That can't happen.
Imagine if we change the rules though. So like, All economic activity had to be carbon negative. Like, imagine, it might be dreaming right now, but imagine if we could rebuild our society so that every area was carbon negative, and or at least carbon neutral. More carbon negative, really. Then
Yeah, that'd be good, but eventually people will be driven to, like I said, mine the seabed of the whole ocean for lithium and whatever other minerals. People will be driven to convert all of their time into an economic resource. Like we do so many things. Like there's so many things we now do for in a money transaction that we used to do for each other for free, like babysitting's one, or childcare. Like, 100 years ago, no one would pay someone to take care of their children, but well, I used to wear boarding schools then, but now it's very very common. We'll pay people to do things that we used to do each other for free as gifts, and that's one way we've kept on growing the economy in Britain, by just doing more things in a financial transaction, rather than just doing things for the love of it for each other. So if you one way we'll either keep growing the economy by dividing up all of our time into little economic chunks to exchange for money. That will end pretty depressingly.
I'm going to be honest, I'm not too educated on economics, really.
That's all right. Neither am I. I just like reading books.
How many books have you read since you've been inside then?
39.
Jesus.
Well, I've been here 7 months.
Oh.
I slowed down. I read about, I can't remember, 15 in the first month. But I slowed down after that, did more writing and designs and things.
Have you done any drawing or painting?
I've mainly done design sketches for structures that I design and build. A little bit of artwork at one of the graphic classes, but mainly design sketches. And literally today, people are hard at work on one of the structures I've been sketching.
What kind of?
It's going to be built. It's a big bamboo and cable structure. It's going to be built at Glastonbury in June. We built it there last year, and it's back again, and it's expanded. It's built by Project Bunny Rabbit. They're on Instagram under Pro Bunny Rabbit, and it's going to be one of the venues at Shangri-La in Glastonbury, which is known as the Naughty Corner. So I think it's a perfect place for our structure to go. And the system of bamboo and cables was one we developed in Extinction Rebellion to do blockades. And the first time it was used was for a blockade of the Murdoch printing presses in 2020.
I bet the police were a bit. I bet the police were a bit puzzled the first time they came across those, weren't they?
Yeah, they were a bit taken aback. They put it in the too hard basket and dealt with everyone on the ground first. But they're quite handy because kind of the person's suspended inside a bird cage, and it's difficult for the police with their cherry picker to reach and grab you. They need to go to quite some lengths and get several cherry pickers, and it's about the most efficient way for one person to hold space.
Oh man, I've never actually been up one of those bamboo towers. You know, I'm actually quite.
I remember you had a little training climb.
Yeah, I didn't get very high though. I didn't get very high. I wanted to. I've always been very eager with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, you got distracted by salsa dancing. I remember. You were off and salsa dancing.
Yeah, that's the day that I met my friend Annie actually.
I remember.
She's been on the show, by the way.
Glorious August sunshine. Has she been on the show?
Yeah, Annie's been on the show. I had her on.
Oh, cool.
She was one of the first guests on.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you and Annie are friends, aren't you?
Yeah, another fascinating person I met through Extinction Rebellion, and someone who helped us with Project Bunny Rabbit and the bamboo structures get into, I guess, the art establishment in London, and got us our first commission. And it's amazing what happens when you just go out and sit down on the road. It just happened that Annie was passing Oxford Circus. I think she probably told you that, and just decided to take part in the Extinction Rebellion. And
she got arrested by accident, actually.
Yeah,
and
I just my first actual action with them was going to Parliament Square for the first rebellion, just to sit in the road outside Parliament. And it's fascinating where you end up after that. Like, I met so many brilliant creative people, and then we ended up starting this artistic construction group, and none of this stuff would have ever happened if we hadn't taken part in disobedient resistance.
Yeah.
It has lots of unexpected offshoots.
It really does, doesn't it? I mean, like, you meet so many incredibly kind, intelligent, caring people, and there's no shortage of different routes to go down once you've got involved in this kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know,
it's very, very empowering and inspiring. You just once you've stood up to the powers that be, in whatever way it is, but just doing something, just stand up for what you know is right, and that life is just generally being just smashed around the earth, and just to stand up against it makes you believe you could do lots of other things, I guess, and it all fits. It all fits with the philosophy I've read, and perhaps one of my favourite philosophers of these days, Joanna Macy. How she describes if humanity's civilization is going to survive, it will go through a great turning, and that will comprise of three mutually essential, mutually reinforcing dimensions of action. And the first one's obstruction, it's trying to stop and slow down the harm and the damage being done to life. And the second one is making alternative systems and ways to do things in balance with life. And the third is transforming our mindsets, transforming our consciousness, so we don't recreate the problems, like stop global warming by digging up all the seabed for lithium, right? We don't just recreate all our problems in different guises. And I've experienced it exactly. Just because I went and sat down on the road in Parliament Square, then boom, I meet all these people who want to create new types of structure out of bamboo. So, I mean, bamboo's a nice thing because it grows really fast, and it's basically a regenerative resource.
Yeah, if it's managed properly, yeah.
Yeah, and now, like that, I'm in prison. I guess I'm doing the consciousness side of things. I just talk to people and write and communicate with all the people who write into me, and I write articles, and it's basically spiritual. It's spiritual work, isn't it?
What kind of articles have you been? Have you been writing articles then?
Yeah, I've just been writing essays about things that have interested me while I've been in prison. Like the first one was about the philosophy of John Locke and comparing that to the Police Crime Sentencing Courts Bill, and that's a trend going on in our government at the moment. Yeah, then half a dozen other essays, just things that were on my burning questions in my head.
Where can are these things online? Where could people find them?
Yeah, they're on Medium.com, and my name, I've got them under Bumblebee Unbarred. So I think if you just put into Google Medium and Bumblebee Unbarred, then you should find it.
Okay.
And I went crazy on the writing up until like my trial, and I think it was a really good process to go through because you're practicing, you're researching all the background and arguments, and then when I got to court, I could, I guess, make the case very emphatically and with confidence, and have answers to all the skepticism of the prosecutor and the judge, and And I think because we presented such a convincing case why we'd done things for very serious reasons, that was part of the reason the judge had to throw the book at it, because he was like, well, other people clearly could share these motivations and reasoning, and they're substantial, so oh shit. I have to crash down on this like a ton of bricks. And I feel that it validates the point we're trying to make. And it's an attempt to keep people in line with a very destructive regime by making everyone afraid. And that's why this solidarity march coming up is really awesome, because you just need millions of people to come out and say, no, not afraid. Not going to be ruled in a way that destroys my future.
Yeah, well, I think there's something very powerful about not being afraid of government, and not being afraid of prison, and not being afraid of what they'll do to you. I want to tell you something, by the way, Morgan. I was given 120 hours community service, and I've done it a couple of times now, but I've just come to the point emotionally and by principle where I've decided I can no longer do that. I can't work for free because of my actions, because of my protesting actions, and I've decided that I'm not going to go anymore. I'm going to refuse to do unpaid work, and I don't care. I don't care if they throw me in prison for a bit. I just hope it's not too long. I don't know. It's just, you might think I'm crazy for that, but it's just the bit I've got, the place I've gotten to. What do you think?
Well, it's another form of disobedience against the regime, isn't it? There's all kinds of ways we can disobey laws when we want to object to how a regime is really running our society. And there's lots of endless ways you can do it.
Well, I think this is coming more from like an emotional response and not like a tactical response. You know, I can't see what I'm going to get from it tactically. I'm just feeling like I'm resisting this system with every ounce of my being. Does that make sense? And it just doesn't feel right to turn up and do unpaid work. Even if, you know, it just doesn't feel right to go and do unpaid work. And some people might think I'm crazy, but yeah, that's what I was going to tell you.
That's your choice. I mean, I wouldn't say it's bad to do unpaid work. I think some of the best work we do is unpaid, and the most beautiful and caring work we do is unpaid.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. It's the context, though, isn't it?
Yes, it's the context, because like what's it now? I also got you on the phone. I'll keep recording. I mean, it's just it's one of the principle of it for me anyway. That's just where I've gotten to, and we'll see what happens from that. And we'll wing it. But we've done about an hour now, by the way. But we can do longer. There's no limit on how long we can go for.
I'm happy to answer more questions if you have more.
Okay. I guess this is a question I've been thinking about to ask you. If you could go back to the day or the night before your QE2 Bridge action, would you do it all over again? Would you, like, knowing like the consequences and where you'd end up and the sentence you'd get, would you do it all over again?
Yes.
Yes. You feel strongly about that?
Yes, because the consequences are the action. It's all one big, long action, and it has so many ripples going out from it, much of which I'll never see or know about.
Yeah.
But that's why we do this kind of disobedience, because it creates a dilemma for the regime. Mm-hmm. If they let it go ahead, then it creates a big direct, like, the message goes out directly because you're doing the action, doing whatever it is, and
getting the message across on that way. But if they shut it down and repress people and punish people, then that also communicates the message. And in a way, the more they punish me, the more it conveys the message. That we're really, when we suspended ourselves on the bridge, we're really challenging the regime to if they want to remove us, then they would need to be violence. And this regime already does a lot of violence out of sight, like to all our climate and ecology, and so many people that suffer from the harm done to that. So there's a whole lot of violence going on out of sight, and we're daring the regime to do that violence in full public view. And thankfully, in our case, they didn't do anything violent to us. But then imprisoning is another type of punishment, and it makes a lot of people pay attention and think about the violence that's going on, the violence that we're doing every day to the world by running our motorways, by running our fossil fuel system in the UK, and then only slowly sort of trying to wind it down. So it creates this dilemma that whether the state acts or doesn't act, the message gets publicised badly.
Yeah, I agree.
So we didn't really know when we set out exactly how it would play out, but I guess we did understand that whichever way it played out, it would make a lot of people confront this horrible truth that we're doing a horrible violence to our world.
To our not just to our world, but to like our children's futures. And I hear that quite a lot. Our children's futures.
Our own future. I mean, I'm 40. I want to live another 50 years or so. I'll definitely be around when all this crap hits the fan.
But
and a lot of people the crap's hitting the fan for people right now, like millions and millions of people.
Yeah, you're right about that.
We don't really know how many people are dying every year because of climate and ecological collapse. It's who knows how much it is, but it's certainly millions by now every year.
I imagine like a future. Can you imagine? I don't want to be pessimistic, but right, like let's say for whatever reason we didn't get enough people to come together, and enough people hearing this message didn't find the courage within themselves to stand up, and 20, 30 years from now, like when I'm like 50, 60 odd year old, there's going to be, well, if you're in your 20s and 30s now, you're 50, 60 year old, and the 18-year-old to that day will not have a future. Like you will have lived your life at the very end of the most advanced moment in human civilization, and you would have enjoyed the nice life that we've talked about and all the things we take for granted. And the 18-year-olds that day will be left absolute shit, an absolute shitstorm, like a broken weather system, heat waves, droughts, wildfires, crop failure, starvation, war, famine, murder, and everything in between. I honestly think, like, and if they manage by some hell of it survive and have children of their own, their children will spit on our graves. Maybe not mine, maybe not yours, but everybody that turned away and tried, and everybody who saw the IPCC report in the office in your engineering firm, read it, understood it, and then thought, oh well, future generations will spit on their graves because they threw away the greatest, like the abundance of life on Earth, the food. So I'm doing all the talking here now, but I guess that's the way I see it anyway. But like they threw away something great.
Yeah, there will. Well, I remember I happened to be up late watching the first night of the Ukraine war last February, and I happened to be working late, and I saw it on the news, and I saw that it was all starting just the minute it started. And then I was like transfixed in horror, like looking at the TV for like 30 hours or so before I finally went to bed, because it made me think that, God, that happened so quick and so just frighteningly fast. It descended into a massive war, and it made me think, God, that's really close to have my home in Europe, and it made me think that there will come a day. Well, I mean, it could, might not. It doesn't need to happen, but there could come a day in the coming decades when another war like that starts. That's bigger, and at that point, any capacity for collective action and thinking about the future and planning long term and addressing all these systemic things, that possibility will completely disintegrate in a moment. And we're living now in a time we still can possibly do big things like for the future, long term. But that could disappear in a moment. And once that's happened, it will just be nothing but short-term survival for small areas of people and whatever. So we're in this window now that could close. Who knows when? And it's certainly a big range of possibilities. That's what I see. Like a massive range of possibilities.
Morgan, it's been great to have you on the show. I think a lot of people need to hear your voice, and they will do through this medium, through this long form podcasting. So if you've liked what we've recorded today and you've liked hearing from Morgan, then please like and subscribe to Activism Uncensored on YouTube. We've also got a Patreon account in the link description below. So is there anything you want to say, Morgan, before we go?
Don't be afraid of the British justice system.
Yeah.
Unless it obviously is structurally racist and misogynist and that. I mean, some people have got to call its bluff en masse. I mean, I don't really see things improving fast enough in the usual channels.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't be afraid of it.
Well, thank you for that, and sign in for another episode.